Okay, so we're ready to get started building our mechanical face. What I want to do is, as I mentioned, I want to start you off with shape-based selections. And we're going to start off creating elliptical selections or circular selections. So what we're going to do, and I'll give you a sense of what we're after here, is we're going to build the eyes for our mechanical face right off the bat here. So these two rusty washers here, go ahead and zoom in on these guys if you would. You can use any of the zooming methods that I had mentioned previously there. So in other words, your control spacebar, command spacebar, that would be just fine as well. I was using controller command plus there to zoom in as well. There we go. Go ahead and zoom in there, use your spacebar to pan around a little bit. This is, by the way, why I mentioned all of these shortcuts earlier, because now that we're actually working inside Photoshop and we're starting to do stuff inside Photoshop, we want to move a lot faster, right? Okay, so what I want to do is I want to select this rusty washer, and as I say, we're going to do so using the elliptical marquee tool, or sometimes I just refer to this guy as the circular selection tool, this guy right here. Okay, so click and hold down on your rectangular marquee tool. That will reveal the elliptical marquee tool. Go ahead and grab this guy. Your cursor changes to a crosshair. And the idea here is that we would try and click and drag out a circle, something like this, right? Now, actually, as a first attempt, that's not bad. I'm actually kind of surprised I got that so quickly. I'm still holding down my mouse, though, because I want to mention here a new feature inside Photoshop CS6. This is called the heads-up display. Notice right beside my cursor, I have a little gray message that tells me the width and height of my selection. So we're going to see these little heads-up display messages as we're working along inside Photoshop. Just something that's a minor note that I wanted to bounce off of you. Okay, back to creating selections here. So I drag out I call them the marching ants. I drag out the marching ants, something like this, right? There we go. 9 times out of 10, the selection that you create is not going to be perfect. So don't feel bad that you might have to take a couple of runs at it to get it to exactly what you want. Okay, so let's say, for instance, I'm not happy with this selection. What I would then do is I would head up to the Select menu and then down to Deselect, which gets rid of all the marching ants, and I can take another shot at it here. So again, maybe I'll bring my cursor up and to the left above the object, something like this, or you could go from any of the corners. It doesn't really matter. And I'll try dragging out another selection, maybe something like this. Okay? Now, as you're going along trying to get these selections, again, don't go crazy trying to get an absolutely perfect selection, although everyone does, so don't feel bad. But as we're trying to get this perfect selection, what we can do is we can actually move a little bit faster in terms of deselecting. First of all, you may have noticed underneath the Select menu the keyboard shortcut for deselecting, Control or Command D. So rather than heading up to the Select menu, what I can do is deselect directly from my keyboard, Control or Command D, to get rid of those marching ants. Or what I could do, once again, if I throw down a selection. Now there you go, there's an example of a very poor selection. What I could do to get rid of the marching ants is simply single click outside of the marching ants to get rid of them, and then I can have another go at it here. There's a couple of neat things that I want to mention here to you as we're trying to select this circular object. And by the way, in the real world, it may not be rusty washers that Jeff found in his garage. It could be, I don't know, it could be beach balls, or it could be perhaps some sort of a circular shape inside a photograph that you want to try and edit or color correct or something like this, right? As we're clicking and dragging out our selection here, something like this, before you let go of your mouse, try holding down your space bar, and that will allow you to move your selection around on screen, allowing you to reposition the selection as you go. Okay, so a neat trick to keep in mind. Holding down that space bar allows me to reposition the selection, because sometimes, you start off and your selection is bad right from the get-go. Well, you can hold down the space bar and try and reposition things as you're creating this selection, something like this, right? The other trick I wanted to show you is up until this point, we've been creating our selection from a corner, right? So either the top left corner, as I've been doing all the way along, or again, we could go from one of the other corners. It doesn't really matter, but we're always creating a selection from the corner. What I could do instead is I can actually create my selection from the center. So what I would do is I would position my crosshairs in the center of the circle, or as close to the center of the circle as I can get it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the Option key here on the Mac, or Alt on the Windows side, and now try clicking and dragging. And now what we're going to do is create this selection from the center rather than from the corner. And as you can see, actually, I did an okay job there. That's not a bad selection there to start off. I find it a lot easier to create my selections from the center rather than from the corner there. Okay, so if you are creating your selections from the center, by the way, I'm just holding down Alt or Option here, I can still use that spacebar trick, and I can still move this guy around, and then I'm holding down Alt and spacebar, or Option and spacebar, by the way, and then I can let go of the spacebar, still holding down Alt or Option, and then continue creating my selection, right? A few more quick tricks to show you here, and then we'll move on. I hope you're enjoying this here. What I can do as well, in addition to creating my selection from the center, of course, by holding down Alt or Option, is I can throw in the Shift key as well. And what that will do is that will give me an absolutely perfect circle. So in other words, we won't get an oval or an ellipse, we'll get a perfect circle. So I have one more trick that I want to show you here, but before I show you this trick, what we need to do is we need to select our washer. So go ahead and select your washer using any of the techniques that I just bounced off you. For instance, here's my selection being drawn from the center, and I'm just going to position him down just a little bit, something like that. Now that I have this set here, what I now want to do is I actually want to knock a hole in my selection. I want to get rid of this center part of my selection. So what's interesting to note here is that I can always add to and subtract from selections. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold down the Option key once again, or the Alt key on the Windows side, and notice that a tiny minus sign appears beside my cursor now, indicating that the next selection that I make is going to subtract from the current selection. So if you're jotting notes, definitely write this down. Holding down Alt or Option will subtract from a selection. Holding down Shift, if I flip over to Shift, now a plus sign appears beside my cursor. Holding down Shift will add to a selection. Okay, so Alt or Option subtracts, Shift adds. Okay, so in this case I want to subtract from a selection, so I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and then click and drag out a marquee, something like this. And again, I'm using my spacebar to help me along and position this as I go. There, something like that. So literally what I've done is I've knocked a hole in my selection. So this white area in the center of my washer is no longer selected. Only the metallic components of the washer are selected.